Woman in Blue Reading a Letter features a woman in blue standing in front of an unseen window reading a letter, oblivious to the fact that we are watching her, which was a new theme in Dutch genre painting. The woman appears to be pregnant, although many have argued that the woman's rounded figure is simply a result of the fashions of the day, wearing a flared jacket over a thick skirt turned over at the waist. Although the woman's loose clothing may be suggestive, pregnancy was very rarely depicted in art during this period. While the viewer is drawn into this intimate scene, the viewer is also kept away physically by the furniture in the foreground. The abundance of blue catches our eye. Vermeer used ultramarine, a pigment that was produced by grinding lapis lazuli into a powder. The white sections of the wall balance the composition and contribute to the calm atmosphere, but unlike the bare walls in some of his paintings, this wall figures prominently due to the map of Holland. On the table, a second page of the letter partially covers a string of large pearls on a blue ribbon, perhaps just removed from the open jewelry box nearby. The woman is comfortably dressed in a blue padded bed jacket, decorated with yellow bows on the front and sleeve, and a long heavy skirt. Soft morning light highlights her forehead and glances across the delicate fabric of the jacket, but leaves the bow around the side curl of her hair and the back of her form in deep shadow. It glints off the large brass nails decorating the Spanish chairs, as well as the small tacks along the edge of the seat. Interestingly, the knob of the map hanger and the left-hand chair cast shadows on the wall, but the woman does not cast any shadows, which showcases Vermeer's command of optical effects. The map of the County of Holland and West Friesland in the Netherlands on the wall behind the woman has been interpreted as suggesting that the letter she reads was written by a traveling husband. Alternatively, the box of pearls barely visible on the table before the woman might suggest a lover, as pearls are sometimes a symbol of vanity. Letter reading reflects a theme throughout Vermeer's works, as a common private moment becomes revealing of the human condition. Vermeer softened the topography on the large map to muted blue, taupe, and ochre tones that suggest her complex internal state. The painting is unique among Vermeer's interiors in that no corner, floor, or ceiling can be seen. Although the content of the correspondence is a mystery, the woman's bent head and parted lips convey a sense of suspense. The significance of the woman's rounded silhouette, which was reduced along the back by Vermeer during the painting process, has prompted much debate since the late 19th century. Girl with a Red Hat. Between 1664 and 1667, Vermeer produced a few paintings of women gazing at the viewer up close. They look straight out of the painting right into our world. This is not a portrait. Vermeer was depicting tronies, vividly painted character heads in fantasy portraits of figures in fictional costumes, which were very popular in his time. In these works, painters explored the human face and facial expressions and effects of light and shade. Girl with a Red Hat is one of Vermeer's smallest paintings. Its attribution to Vermeer, as it was painted on a recycled wood panel and not on canvas, has been a matter of controversy with scholars on both sides of the argument. However, a recent study carried out by the curators of the National Gallery of Art have with certainty established this as a Vermeer painting, a conclusion also supported by Dutch experts. The painting depicts a very young woman dressed in blue, wearing a collar that appears to be lace and a red hat. Her hair is up and she wears a pair of dangling earrings. She looks at the viewer as if she had just turned her head in the direction of a sound, perhaps a voice, that has captured her attention. Her mouth is slightly open and her face, slightly pink, receives light from the right, which is unusual in the works of Vermeer. Vermeer's focus on the reflection of light can be seen in the carved wooden lions' heads at either end of the chair's backrest. The wide brim of the hat casts a large shadow on the woman's face. Only the tip of her nose and the girl's lips catches the light. The white highlights in her eyes help her eyes shine. As we have seen, her pearl earrings were typical of many of Vermeer's female subjects. The red hat is painted in 2 layers. The lower layer consists of vermilion mixed with a black pigment. The upper layer is a madder lake glaze. Vermeer used a mixture of azurite and yellow ochre for the green areas and umber for the browns in the wall. Vermeer produced the folds in her blue outfit by utilizing contrasting yellow paint. Because the image appears to be hazy and out of focus, some experts have suggested that Vermeer may have used a camera obscura. The decoration scheme with the tapestry in the background seems to correlate with tapestries made at the end of the 16th century in the southern Netherlands. Vermeer often depicted tapestries from this era. Interestingly, an X-ray study used in preparation for a 2022 exhibition titled Vermeer's Secrets determined that Vermeer began this work by painting the portrait of a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Girl with a Flute. Like Girl with a Red Hat, this small artwork is painted on a wood panel. The painting is a close-up of a girl facing front, wearing a conical striped hat and a blue-green fur-trimmed jacket, holding a double recorder, a type of flute. The background is a tapestry, similar to that in Girl with a Red Hat, but here we only get a partial view of it. The young woman wears beautiful pearl earrings. They are created from a thin translucent layer of gray paint and a dab of white to convey the reflection of the light. The fur-trimmed jacket was very prevalent in at-home attire for Dutch women of all socioeconomic classes in the 17th century, and as we have seen, similar jackets are worn in other Vermeer paintings. Like with Girl with a Red Hat, Girl with a Flute is a tronie, a study of a remarkable facial expression or a stock character in costume. Tronies were produced for the mass market, not for patrons. Unlike typical portraits, the models were not identified. The painting's attribution has been questioned since 1942, although prior to 2022, it was generally cautiously attributed to Vermeer. In October 2022, the National Gallery of Art examined the painting using microscopic pigment analysis and advanced imaging technology and concluded that the work was not painted by Vermeer. And as of October 8, 2022, the gallery would change the attribution of the painting to, quote, studio of Johannes Vermeer, end quote. There had been suspicions in the past that Vermeer may have begun the piece, but another artist finished the work. However, the National Gallery of Art's team of curators, art historians, conservators, research scientists, and imaging scientists concluded, based on the many executional flaws they discovered in every layer and every stage of the painting, that Vermeer had no involvement in painting any of it. The National Gallery of Art concluded that the mystery artist who painted Girl with a Flute was familiar with Vermeer's unique methods and materials, but unable to achieve his level of expertise. They may have been a pupil or apprentice in training, an amateur who paid Vermeer for lessons, a freelance painter hired on a project-by-project basis, or even a member of Vermeer's family. Girl with a Flute is very close in concept to Girl with a Red Hat, and the two works of art share many similarities, so it's likely that the artist of this painting was inspired by Girl with a Red Hat. As with Girl with a Red Hat, some experts believe that a camera obscura was used for this painting due to the way the reflection of light was utilized and because the painting is a little out of focus. In response to the National Gallery of Art's deattribution announcement, a professor of art history at the University of Amsterdam argued that although the National Gallery of Art's research was, quote, hard to dismiss, end quote, he did not think they were indisputably right on all details. He noted that Girl with the Red Hat is also painted on wood. It is a similar composition to Girl with a Flute, and in his view, it has similar deviations from Vermeer's technique. The Rijksmuseum curator decided to label the painting as an authentic Vermeer for this Rijksmuseum Vermeer exhibition. A lady writing, also known as a lady writing a letter. The lady in the painting is shown in a shadowed interior writing a letter while sitting at a table in a room. She appears to have been interrupted as she has turned her head away from the letter to look towards the viewer while she continues to hold the quill in her right hand. She rests her other hand on the tablecloth. A hint of a smile crosses her lips. She is dressed elegantly in a luxurious lemon yellow morning jacket trimmed with spotted white fur, and she wears 2 pearl earrings. She also has yellow and white ribbons in her hair. She sits in a straight-back chair with leather upholstery and lion's head finials. The table covered with a blue cloth has rare objects on it: a small silver-studded wood box, a silver inkwell, and a string of pearls extended horizontally across the table with a yellow silk ribbon. All small objects in the painting are placed on the table. This concentration of small forms stand in contrast with the large forms used in the rest of the composition, which create a geometric framework for the figure. The bright light illuminates her, which is in contrast to the unlit dark background, so our focus is on her. As her gaze engages the viewer, it suggests the painting may be a portrait instead of a general portrayal of a young woman at her writing table. Vermeer's mastery of light is also apparent in the way various elements of the painting are lit up by the diffused light. The tabletop, her morning jacket, the pearls decorating her jewelry box, her earrings, and her satin hair ribbons. On the back of the wall is a painting with an ebony frame which covers 2/3 of the width of the composition. The painting depicts a large string instrument, possibly a double bass. It is likely that the painting on the wall is by another Dutch artist. Vermeer's intention in including a vanitas painting in a rich interior with an elegantly dressed lady was likely to convey the philosophical vanitas message that all worldly possessions and achievements are ultimately doomed to fail and end in death. Many of the objects seen in the painting, such as the woman's coat, the cloth on the table, and the string of pearls, also appear in other Vermeer works. This has led to speculation that he or his family members own the objects, and even that the subjects of the paintings are his relatives. The woman in this work has more individualized features than some of Vermeer's models, and it has sometimes been speculated that she could be the artist's wife Katerina, who would have been close in age, early to mid-30s, to the woman in the painting. It has often been suggested that in his paintings, Vermeer sought to depict in his models that which he could not give to his wife and family: common affluence. Mistress and Maid. As we have seen, Vermeer was known for his domestic scenes containing women. This well-preserved painting shows an elegant mistress and her maid as they look over a letter that the mistress just received. The mistress is interrupted during her own writing due to the suddenness of the arrival of the letter. The fact that she could write a letter indicated her privileged position because few people were educated enough to read or write at the time. Letters are a prevalent theme in Vermeer's paintings from the 1660s, but in this painting, the maid is an added new element. The gestures and expressions of the two women suggest anxiety over the letter and its potential contents. The modestly costumed maid emerges from the dark background to deliver the letter. The elegantly dressed mistress, whose affluence is indicated by her hairdo, large pearl earrings, and the fur-trimmed yellow mantle, is dramatically lit. The light in the painting comes from the left and falls on the mistress's face. The mistress has a serious gaze with her lips parted slightly and her fingertips lifted to her chin in a questioning manner. The lighted parts of the yellow overcoat are formed with sweeping brushstrokes of lead tin yellow, and the shadows are created with definition. Is the letter from her lover? As with many Vermeer paintings, a lot is left to the imagination. The letter's contents, which are a mystery, and the mistress's ambiguous response evoke in the viewer a sense of mystery and uncertainty. If you look closely, you can see the window reflected in the glassware on the table. This is another great example of Vermeer's attention to detail. At least since the 1950s, art historians have been puzzled over the painting's apparent lack of finish because of the appearance of a hard-to-see curtain in its otherwise dark and empty background. It had even been suggested that the painting had been finished after Vermeer's death by another hand to make it saleable. However, it was discovered that the composition began with a tapestry or painting filling the background, and that Vermeer later painted it out, likely after deciding that a relatively dark and plain background would better focus on the women's interactions. Tapestries and paintings frequently fill Vermeer's painted interiors, so the initial presence of one of these elements is consistent with other examples in the artist's collection. In this early background, Vermeer sketched at least 4 human figures and other elements in a mixture of black and earth colors, except for a few features composed of a copper-based greenish or bluish pigment. The blue in this painting is quite clean. However, although the tablecloth does appear to be blue, an original bright transparent green along the left perimeter of the painting that had been protected from light exposure by the picture's frame was observed when the painting was examined with a stereo microscope. Some believe that Vermeer added a green curtain to draw focus to the foreground figures. The original green color of the curtain has so degraded that it cannot generally be seen. The discovery of the original color is not surprising because Vermeer's probate estate inventory includes a green tablecloth. As previously mentioned, it seems likely that he modeled elements of this composition after objects he owned. The Lacemaker. This work shows the soft light on a young woman wearing a yellow bodice, which is the upper part of a woman's dress, with a delicate lace collar, holding up a pair of bobbins or spools in her left hand, between her thumb, index finger, and middle finger, tightening the two threads as she carefully places a pin in the pillow on which she is making her bobbin lace. She is very focused on her craft and is unaware of the viewer watching her work. She appears to be wealthy based on her clothing and fashionable hairstyle. Vermeer must have studied the woman's hands closely while she worked, as each finger appears to have a role in controlling the threads. The art of lace making is portrayed accurately. We are mesmerized by her artistic skill. The soft light shines on one side of her face, her yellow jacket, and her work table. A small book is shown in the foreground, which can be tied shut with the two blue ribbons. Traditionally, the image of a woman making lace is about domestic virtue, so the book could be a small Bible or prayer book, or a book containing patterns which the woman is making. Vermeer's signature is on the wall behind the woman, but it's hard to see. At 9 by 6 by 8.3 inches, this work is the smallest of Vermeer's paintings, seen by one author as one of the most abstract and unusual. The girl is set against a blank wall, probably because the artist wanted to eliminate any external distractions from the central image. Some believe Vermeer may have used a camera obscura while composing the work. Many optical effects typical of projection can be seen, in particular the blurring of the foreground, with the rug on the table and the red and white threads flowing out of the sewing cushion out of focus. By rendering areas of the canvas as out of focus, Vermeer is able to get the viewer to focus on the woman's hands and bobbins, which are clearly defined. According to the art historian Lawrence Gowing, quote, "The achievement of Vermeer's maturity is complete. It is not open to extension. No universal style is discovered. We have never the sense of abundance that the characteristic jewels of his century gives us, the sense that the precious vein lies open, ready to be worked. There is only one lacemaker. We cannot imagine another. It is a complete and single definition." End quote. The Geographer. This is one of Vermeer's few works in which a man is the focus. The Geographer, dressed in a Japanese-style robe which was popular among scholars, studies the maps on the table and measures distances with a pair of dividers in his hand. However, he pauses for thought as his gaze drifts off into the distance. The light falls directly on the geographer's papers on his forehead, emphasizing the artist's intellectual focus on the world. The window separates him from the painting's outside world, while the stool and carpet create a distance between the figure and the viewer. Details of the man's face are slightly blurred, suggesting movement. His eyes are perhaps squinting in the sunlight, or are an indication of intense thinking. Serena Carr asserts that the painting depicts a, quote, "flash of inspiration," end quote, or even, quote, "revelation," end quote. The drawn curtain on the left and the position of the oriental carpet on the table, pushed back, are both symbols of revelation. Quote, "He grips a book as if he's about to snatch it up to corroborate his ideas," end quote. The geographer is shown to be, quote, "someone excited by intellectual inquiry," end quote, with his active stance, the presence of maps, charts, a globe, and books, as well as the dividers he holds in his right hand, according to art historian Arthur K. Wheelock Jr. Quote, "The energy in this painting is conveyed most notably through the figure's pose, the massing of objects on the left side of the composition, and the sequence of diagonal shadows on the wall to the right," end quote. Vermeer made several changes in the painting that enhanced the feeling of energy in the picture. The man's head was originally in a different position, to the left of where the viewer now sees it, indicating the man perhaps was looking down rather than peering out the window into the far distance, thus setting the painting's atmosphere by choosing the moment of inspiration. The dividers he holds in his hand were originally vertical, not horizontal. The more horizontal position and loose grasp communicate more convincingly that he's actually pausing his work with this tool, which was used for measuring, calculating, and transferring the distance between two geographical points. Instead of the brass square, a sheet of paper was originally on the small stool at the lower right, and removing it probably made that area darker. The cartographic objects surrounding the man are some of the actual items a geographer would have. The globe, the dividers, and a cross staff hung on the center post of the window, used to measure the angle of celestial objects like the sun or stars, and the chart the man is using, which according to one scholar appears to be a nautical chart on vellum, which is a fine parchment. The sea chart on the wall of all the seacoasts of Europe has been identified as one published. This accuracy indicates Vermeer had a source familiar with the profession. The man in the painting may have been the source of Vermeer's correct display of surveying and geographical instruments, and possibly of his knowledge of perspective. Many art experts think the man in the painting was probably Anton von Leeuwenhoek, a contemporary and possible friend of Vermeer who was also born in Delft. His name came up previously when discussing how Vermeer could have potentially obtained a camera obscura. The families of both men were in the textile business, and both families had a strong interest in science and optics. A microscopist, von Leeuwenhoek was described after his death as being so skilled in, quote, navigation, astronomy, mathematics, philosophy, and natural science that one can certainly place him with the most distinguished masters of the art, end quote. At the time Vermeer painted the Geographer, von Leeuwenhoek would have been almost 36 years old. He would have been actively studying for his examination for surveyor, which he passed in 1669. There is no documentary evidence for any kind of a relationship between the two men during Vermeer's lifetime, although in 1676, von Leeuwenhoek was appointed a trustee for Vermeer's estate. The globe and the map on the wall represent the state of the art of cartography, which the Netherlands pioneered. The globe in the background is a depiction of a real globe made in the early 1600s. It's turned to see the Indian Ocean, where many ships of the Dutch East India Company sailed. Vermeer's rendering of the map in the background is so precise that even though we only see a part of it, it can still be identified. The map shows the coasts of Europe and northern Africa, where they were actually used for navigation at sea. Vermeer attempted to capture the moment in which the geographer surveys the world in his mind. This is only one of 3 paintings Vermeer signed and dated. Curiously, Vermeer signed this work twice. Technical examination has shown that both signatures are authentic. The first is on the door of the cupboard. The second signature appears on the wall in the upper right corner of the canvas. The Love Letter. While many of Vermeer's paintings centered on a single figure up close, he found a new formula involving 2 or 3 figures in larger interior scenes. In his Love Letter, he places the 2 women at a distance from us, and so like him, we observe them from an adjacent room, which is lavishly decorated with a marble floor, paintings on the wall, and gold leather wall hangings. The viewer feels like they are witnessing something that was not meant for their eyes. The tied-up curtain in the foreground creates the impression that the viewer is looking at an intensely private personal scene. The lady of the house has stopped playing her cittern, a small lute, as the maidservant hands her a letter and comments on it. The young woman looks nervous, as if she is uncertain about what she is about to read. Is it a love letter? The seascape on the wall, with a blue sky and calm sea, suggests so, as love has been compared to the sea and a lover to the ship, tempestuous or calm, threatened or safe. Love Letter remains the only one of Vermeer's works to incorporate a seascape. The idyllic landscape in the painting above conveys the same message, as it is of a traveler on a sandy road. This may refer to the absence of the man who is writing to the lady. The letter is veiled in shadow, which makes it stand out against the woman's yellow jacket. The light falling on her face focuses our attention on her reaction. However, the maid's calm demeanor, friendly smile, and hand on her side suggest that she is confident that the letter contains welcome news. The diagonals on the checkered floor and the objects in the foreground create the impression of depth and 3-dimensionality. The row of white marble floor tiles guides our eye to the 2 women. Floors like this were quite uncommon. They were mostly found in the houses of the extremely wealthy and often in smaller rooms. Vermeer utilized quick, loose brushstrokes to create the illusion of marble. The fact that it is a love letter that the woman has received is made clear by the fact that she is carrying the cittern, used in the period as a symbol of love, often carnal love. This idea is further reinforced by the slippers at the very bottom of the picture. The removed slipper was another symbol of sex. The floor brush would appear to represent domesticity, and its placement at the side of the painting may suggest that domestic concerns have been forgotten or pushed aside. The colors blue and gold are important in the composition of the painting. In the household that the love letter takes place in, gilded ornamentation indicates substantial wealth. The gold is located on the woman's dress, the top of the fireplace, and many of the objects, which complements the blue on the floor, the maid's dress, and the picture frames. Classical influence is also apparent in the Ionic columns of the fireplace. The blue of the maid's dress looks uniform to the naked eye, but the Rijksmuseum had conducted a chemical analysis and found that the top part of the dress was made of ultramarine and the lower part was a mixture of ultramarine and green earth. In this work, Vermeer plays with the contrast between the well-lit room and the shadowy space in the foreground. It is difficult to make out the subjects that surround the doorpost. A map is hanging on the left-hand wall, and to the right there's a chair with sheet music on it. The curtain has been pulled to one side. Vermeer has signed this painting on the piece of wall above the laundry basket to the left of the maid's blue skirts. In 1971, the painting was stolen from its display at the Center for Fine Arts in Brussels, where it was on loan from the Rijksmuseum. However, when the frame failed to fit through the window, the thief cut the canvas from its frame with a potato peeler and hid the painting in his back pocket. He later requested a ransom and then requested the two museums raise money to combat world famine. The thief was arrested and the painting was returned to the Rijksmuseum in very poor condition. The restoration took almost a year. Woman writing a letter with her maid. The work shows a middle-class woman attended by a housemaid who is presumably acting as messenger and go-between for the lady and her lover. It may have been partly inspired by Woman Sealing a Letter, a painting by Gerard de Borck. Lady Writing a Letter with Her Maid is the first of Vermeer's experiments with centrifugal composition, where the focus is not only from the center of the canvas. In addition, it is his third work in which the drama is not centered on a single figure. The maid is shown standing in the midground, behind her lady, with her hands crossed and waiting for the letter to be completed. The positions of their bodies indicate that the two women are disconnected. The folded arms of the maid seem as an attempt to display a sense of self-containment. However, she is detached from her lady both emotionally and psychologically. The maid's gaze toward the half-visible window indicates an inner restlessness and boredom as she waits impatiently for the messenger to carry her lady's letter away. Some art historians dispute this view. According to Pascal Bonnefoy, while complicity is not, quote, indicated by a look or a smile, end quote, from either woman, the mere fact of her presence during such an intimate act as the composition of a love letter indicates at least a degree of intimacy between the two. Dressed in a green bodice and a shirt with puffed white sleeves, the lady holds a quill in her right hand to write the letter, while using her left to keep the paper in place. The content of her message remains a mystery. Vermeer fully lit the woman's right arm and shoulder and the right side of her face, but placed them against a piece of the wall that is in the shade. Her left side, on the other hand, is not as well illuminated, but is set against a brightly lit part of the wall. These strong light and dark contrasts make the lady visually come forward. Waiting for her mistress to tell her to post the letter, the maid stands near the back wall of the room, holding her arms clasped together. She looks to the left through a decorative stained glass window, but what exactly she sees is unclear. Although she is subordinate to her mistress and placed behind, the maid is represented full length and is positioned right in the center of the composition. Although we cannot read the content of the lady's message, we can assume that 17th century viewers would have regarded it as a love letter, as virtually every letter in Dutch art of this time was amorous in nature. In the foreground on the floor lies a red seal, a stick of sealing wax, and an object that is either a letter with a crumpled wrapper or a letter writing manual, a standard aid for personal correspondence at the time. In either case, the objects seem to have been thrown away by the lady in a heightened state of emotion, which took place right before the moment depicted. The large painting on the back wall represents the biblical story of the finding of Moses from Exodus. We can see similarities between the lady writing a letter seated in the foreground and the Pharaoh's daughter holding Moses in the painting on the back wall, and between the maidservant standing behind her mistress and Miriam waiting behind the Pharaoh's daughter. Vermeer probably wanted to tell us that the lady's amorous fate is predestined, in the same way as Moses' life was. This painting and others was stolen in 1974 from Ireland by armed members of the IRA. The thieves used screwdrivers to cut the paintings from their frames. However, The Vermeer and other works were recovered 8 days later at a cottage in County Cork. The work was again taken in 1986 by a gang led by a Dublin gangster, and the painting was held for a large ransom. However, the money was not paid, and the painting was eventually recovered in a 1993 exchange at Antwerp Airport, which turned out to be a sting operation organized by the Irish police. Vermeer did not sell a woman writing a letter with her maid during his lifetime. After his death, his widow gave this and another painting to a local baker in Delft. She did so to cover a substantial debt for bread she and her family had bought on account. Young Woman Seated at a Virginal, also known as A Young Woman Seated at the Virginals, is a painting today attributed to Johannes Vermeer, though this was for a long time widely questioned. A series of technical examinations from 1993 on confirmed the attribution. This painting captures the quiet joy of a young woman in harmony with her music. As she gently plays the keyboard of her virginal, a popular type of instrument, the keyboard of which is positioned to the right of center, she leans slightly forward in her chair while looking out with a sympathetic expression, as though desiring to share the sounds of her instrument with the viewer. Here Vermeer has focused entirely on the woman and her instrument, giving the viewer no hint of the nature of the room in which she sits, except for the simple white wall behind her. Therefore, all of her attention is directed to her, and she responds in kind. Her direct eye contact draws us into the scene. This powerful human connection holds us in place. We find ourselves pulled into her world and imagining the quiet rhythms of the music she plays. Music making serves the purpose of courtship. The viewer to whom the woman looks out assumes the role of a potential suitor. The tightly wound curls, red ribbons, and the strand of small pearls in her hair indicates that she is a young lady of proper upbringing. But it is the warmth of her gaze and her welcoming smile that suggests that she is a real person with emotions and feelings. Dressed elegantly in a cream-colored satin skirt and yellow shawl, the woman's outstretched hands rest on the keys as she pauses from playing, perhaps because she has been interrupted, as she turns toward the viewer. Vermeer used dabs of white paint to define the individual pearls as they catch the light. 2 dabs of white paint just visible above the young woman's shawl show that she also wears a pearl necklace. As we have seen, Vermeer was a master of manipulating optical effects in his paintings. Here, natural light enters the room from an unseen window in the upper left corner and delicately illuminates the woman's face. Pale pinks infused with light define the contours of her upper cheek and nose and bring a warm glow to her skin. The shadows, in contrast, are modeled with green pigment blended with flesh tones. The light also illuminates the open music book on the stand before her. Her wrists and hands cast a faint reflection on the polished front of the virginal, further demonstrating Vermeer's mastery of light. The clear light emanating from the upper left corner of this room illuminates the plaster wall's rough, uneven texture. Vermeer achieved this by mixing the expensive pigment of ultramarine made from lapis lazuli with gray and white. The cool color and sharpness of detail on the wall are in contrast to the foreground, where the woman's arms and hands are slightly out of focus to create the effect of depth. The simple geometric form of the music stand above it is juxtaposed with the textured wall. Vermeer applied the thick stroke of white paint along the stand's base to create the effect of sunlight hitting the wood. The woman's yellow shawl is gathered tightly around her upper body in thick folds that create deep shadows. Vermeer did not originally paint the garment in this way. Technical examination and x-rays have revealed that the musician first wore a different costume, consisting of a short jacket with an intricately designed sleeve. The shawl that we see now was an alteration made by Vermeer himself during the painting process. The woman's full cream-colored skirt falls along the side of the chair in deep, smooth folds. Fluid strokes and highlights of white, mixed with green-tinted shadows, evoke the texture of satin and its stiff movement. To depict accurate perspective in his works, Vermeer often followed a method involving the use of a pinhole as a vanishing point, to which all orthogonal lines, which are lines that are at right angles to each other in the composition, converge. Here, evidence of a pinhole is present near the woman's shoulder. Following the orthogonal lines created by the front panel of the virginal to this precise point reveals evidence of the painting's perspective. Young woman standing at a virginal. The oil painting depicts a richly dressed woman playing a luxurious model virginal in a home with paintings on the wall and some of the locally manufactured Delftware blue and white tiles that appear in other Vermeer works, which all identify this interior as a prosperous Dutch home. Each tile is painted with single figures or boats. The woman wears a pearl necklace around her neck. Her fashionable dress is composed of a yellow satin skirt, and her blue bodice is edged around the shoulders in lace. Red ribbons decorate her sleeves at the elbow and shoulder. The young woman stands at the virginal, but it seems that her attention is elsewhere as she stares out of the picture towards the viewer, perhaps thinking about her absent lover. The lady's facial expression is hard to read. With the faintest of smiles, she seems to be looking expectantly at the viewer. At the same time, she gives an impression of remaining somewhat reserved and distant. The virginal, like in the previous painting, features the keyboard situated to the right of the center. Vermeer shows a particularly luxurious model with a painted lid, as opposed to the more common examples that were decorated with patterned paper with a printed motto. It is not clear if the woman is actually playing. Her position seems to suggest that she is resting her fingers lightly on the keys without movement. She might have paused to address the viewer. The painting on the wall behind the woman, which shows Cupid holding a playing card or tablet, is attributed to Dutch artist Cesar van Everdingen. This motif may either represent the idea of faithfulness to a single lover, or perhaps reflecting the presence of the virginal, the traditional association of music and love. The rugged landscape on the inside of the instrument's lid was identified as a painting by the Delft artist Peter Groenewegen. Interestingly, the smaller upright landscape in the gilt frame on the wall derives from the same painting. Vermeer has studied the fall of light from the window in minute detail, how it emphasizes the intricate relief of the gilded frame surrounding the landscape painting on the back wall, how it highlights the upholstery studs which have been used to finish the blue chair, how it intensifies the luster of the pearls on the neck of the young woman, and how it accentuates the creases of her dress and intensifies the sheen of the satin. In order to record these minute details, Vermeer almost certainly used the camera obscura, which helped him to focus on the exact nature of the objects. The room is bathed in clear light, but interestingly, the woman is turned away from the light source, her face appearing in indirect half-light. Vermeer achieved this light effect by using green earth pigment applied over flesh colors. As we know, music is often related to love in Dutch paintings, and the virginal can represent pure love. Light falls onto and draws attention to the empty chair in the foreground. This could be read as an invitation to the viewer to join the woman in a musical duet and to join her in the pursuit of love. And now we will see our 26th and final Vermeer painting, Young Woman Seated at a Virginal. In a relatively dark corner of a room sits a young woman facing left and playing a virginal as she looks at the viewer. It has been suggested that it and lady standing at a virginal may have been created as pendants, because their sizes, date, and subject matter are all similar. A recent study has shown that the canvas for the two paintings also came from the same bulk cloth. In addition, the ground depicted in the canvas appears identical to that used for both the lady standing and the young woman seated. The dark window and the dimly lit room suggest this is either a nighttime scene or a room darkened by closing the shutters. In contrast, warm light originating from a hidden source behind the curtain illuminates the viola da gamba holding a bow between its strings in the foreground, the front edge of the virginal, the woman's face and upper body, and part of the painting in the background, thereby connecting these elements thematically. The young woman is addressing the viewer with an enticing gaze and a faint smile. Using a tiny dab of white paint focusing the attention on her full lips, Vermeer has framed the woman's face with light effects on the pearl necklace around her neck and on her glossy ringlets. The woman's expensive instrument is decorated with painted marbling, and the idyllic landscape on the inside of the virginal's lid has been identified as a work by a Delft landscape painter, which might have been in Vermeer's household. The traditional relationship between harmonious music and idyllic landscape is reflected in the frequent use of landscape paintings for the decoration of instruments. The painting in the background, a version of the Procurus by Dirk van Baburen, shows the scene of a prostitute strumming a lute while smiling at a man who offers her a coin, and may provide additional meaning to the scene's more general association between music and love. It may be interpreted as suggesting the young woman playing the Virginal is promiscuous. The position of her hands, her dynamic posture, and the sheet of music propped up in front of her suggest that she is fully engaged in her performance. 17th century keyboard instruments were typically constructed without attached legs and were either placed on a tabletop or put on a dedicated stand, which could vary in height according to the owner's wishes. Curiously, no musical instrument was listed in the inventory of Vermeer's possessions drawn up shortly after the artist's death. The unattended instrument in the foreground can be understood as an invitation to the viewer to join the woman in a duet. The viola da gamba plays a significant role in Baroque music because it provided the basso continuo, which is an accompanying part that includes a bass line and harmonies that was key to the harmonic structure of a piece. In this way, the painting could be read as a metaphor for harmonious love. Furthermore, the painting can be related to a popular emblem from 1618. The man in the emblem's picture plays his lute while a second instrument is left unused. The accompanying text explains that the resonance of one instrument resonates onto the other, just as two hearts can exist in harmony even if they are separated. You can clearly see Vermeer's signature to the right of the woman's head under the painting frame. Well, that was the Vermeer Exhibition at the Rijksmuseum. I hope that, like me, you've learned a lot about the Dutch master, Johannes Vermeer. Whether he used a camera obscura or not, his attention to detail and precise utilization of light and geometric lines have made him one of the greatest artists of all time. While you won't be able to see this many Vermeers in one place, you can still see his works at various museums around the world, including the Rijksmuseum. If you do, perhaps you will now see his masterpieces in a different light.